All right, so now using these formulas, I've got a lot of data, which is really helpful, but I want to look through this data in a little bit different way. I want to know of my clean markets, how much revenue, total revenue, came from New York, how many total units came from New York. I want to know of the pencils, how much money came from pencils versus binders and pens. And I want to be able to cleanly just look at that. So how do I take all of these cells and figure that out really quickly? Well, I would use a pivot table to do that. So in order to answer those questions, what I'm going to do is select this right here. This will select everything in my sheet. Then I'm going to go up to Insert and Pivot Table and say OK. So what this is going to do is it's creating a new sheet. So I'm going to label this pivot so I know which sheet it is. And now I have all my fields over here, and I can start to select them, drag and drop, and play around into one of these four options. So for the most part, you're going to be looking at rows and values. So let's look at clean market to begin. Puts it over here. That's not what we want. We want to drag it over to the row. And so now I have my clean market. Let's make that a little bigger. It's easier to see. I have my clean market, Boston and New York, and then blank. And I can remove the blank by selecting that drop down, deselect that, and say, okay, now I'm only looking at Boston and New York. Now I want to know, let's start with how much money comes from each market. So do total. That drops it here. Sum of total. So if I select that, go to my home, and select my accounting icon, I can see how much of my total revenue came from each market. So total revenue here, how much from New York, how much from Boston, and I see New York generated about $3,000 more than Boston. Now, if you notice, if I click outside of these cells in here, my options go away. So if I want to get that pivot table back, select in, now I'm good. So that was really, really helpful. So I want some more information though. I want to know items. So I want to know how much each item generated. And in this situation, I don't really need to know the market quite yet. So I'm going to move the market up here to keep it out of the way for now. But obviously this isn't right. So I want to go down to count of item. I want to move it over into rows. And now I can see where my revenue is coming from. And I see I had binders, desks, pens, pencil set, and pencils. And by far, binders generated the most revenue. So that's a really important thing to know. So binders are where most of my revenue is coming from. Now let's look at how many units were sold for each of those. So we have sum of units. I don't want that to be in dollar signs anymore. I want that to be a number, so I'll select that, go up here, select my comma, and I can say I can remove the decimal places there. So even though I sold more pencils than I did binders, binders generated the most revenue. So it's great. Now I'm getting a little bit more information. So now I want to know this information by market. So I can take my market here and I can drop it in. And I can filter it either way just by moving these around. So I can say, okay, I have Boston. Here's the money generated, binders, desk, pen, etc. within Boston and within New York. So that's really great. But I would like to look at full name. I want to see who generated the most revenue. So the names came in here. We're going to move it over to this column. Now we have to get a couple things out of here. I only want the names. And now I can see, okay, names, total units, sum of units. So looking through this, I can quickly see that Patrick brought in the most overall revenue with 243 total sales. Jared brought in least only $444. So in a sales organization, that's really important to understand who's bringing in the most revenue, how many units did they sell. So interesting to see here that Patrick sold the most amount of revenue, but Jeff sold the most amount of units. Well, based on the analysis we just did, we can probably take a guess as to what units each one of them sold, because clearly Patrick was doing a better job of selling the more expensive units, where Jeff was just pushing some of the cheaper ones. And probably Jared was as well, with 186 units, but only $444. So you could continue to filter this however you want, but a pivot table is a really great way to quickly digest that information and take that large data set and pull out some actionable insights from it.